Well, welcome, and I really do appreciate the invitation. When John called me, I was pretty excited about returning to Door Creek and doing something for Door Creek. Many of you may not realize that when I was chief, we used to hold meetings here. And so the last time I was at Door Creek Church, which was maybe about 3-4 years ago, I'm sitting in front of about 100 people, but they were all wearing guns at that time. So that's not to say someone may not be doing it, but they were all wearing guns. One of the things that I've always wanted to do, and when you're in uniform in the state of Wisconsin, you can't do this because of the issues of separation of church and state. I've always wanted to look at a crowd of people and say, God bless you. So God bless you for being here. I've got about 25 minutes, I believe. I've got some stories. I like telling stories. And what I was asked to talk about is collaboration and justice, and what does that mean to Madison? I'd like to do that, but I also like to open it up for Q&A. And just by way of a little background, I've been a little busy. Not only did I retire, my last day was in 2013, but I retired from the Madison Police Department in 2014. Ran the Urban League of Madison for a while. I've been traveling across the country doing consulting work in procedural justice, police legitimacy, and something called Blue Courage, which has taken me all over the country. I mean, I've talked to literally hundreds of thousands of police officers. I've been at the heat of Ferguson. I was there at Ferguson. I was there in New York during Eric Gardner. I've been to Baltimore. You name it, I've been there, okay? And then this summer, I'm at a picnic with my family, and I get this call. And I thought it was a joke. So I'm having a beer, and I get this call, and the person on the other end says that they're from the Justice Department, and they would like for me to come to Washington to work. And they said, you would be a presidential appointment. So I looked at my beer, then I looked at the phone, and I thought it was a joke, really. But it wasn't, and I've been in D.C. now since November 30th. It's been fascinating. It's implementing the 21st century policing recommendations, and right now we're at a crossroads in this country. I don't have to tell you that in terms of justice and where policing is and what we're trying to do. The bottom line, my job is to help institutionalize 21st century reforms in policing. Now, if you think about policing right now, I'll list some words. And policing has really changed, and I'm sure you've seen it. You see it on the news all the time. But if I were to say things like going dark, Occupy, Black Lives Matter, less lethal, these are words and things that we were not dealing with when I came on. So what the president has done with the 21st century recommendations, and I'll say this and I'll move on to the topic, is that he's asking the question, what does top quality policing look like in the 21st century? What are the best practices? What are the best procedures? And so that's my job. My job is to help the country move those forward and institutionalize them. There are 59 recommendations, and that's what I'm doing in Washington, although I do really miss Madison. This is my home, and I miss Madison. So when John asked me to talk about collaboration and justice, I thought, what do they have to do together? But as I thought about it, they're really connected. And let me connect it by, as I always do, tell a story. In 2008, I was asked by then Governor Jim Doyle to lead another task force. There's got to be something else going on here. Lead another task force. It was a task force on reducing racial disparities in the criminal justice system in the state of Wisconsin. At the time, the African-American population in the state of Wisconsin was 6%. But African-Americans made up 45% of those that were in Department of Corrections facilities, 45%. And this was on the heels of one of those other stories that had just come out about, you know, the lives of African-Americans in the state of Wisconsin and here. So we're sitting there with this task force, and this task force is made up of legislators, judges, prosecutors, police officers, community members. And so we're asking the question. There was one meeting where we're asking the question, how did we get here? How did the state of Wisconsin, How did the state of Wisconsin get to this point where we have almost 50% of the prison population is made up of African Americans with only 6% of the state's population? And this is a true story. This is how it went. The folks from the Department of Corrections said, well, I really don't know how we got there. I just have the people that the judges send me. Judges. How did this happen? Well, I'm really not sure. I just deal with the people that the prosecutors send me. Okay? Prosecutors in the room. I really don't know how we got here. I just deal with the people that the police send me. Okay, so I'm a cop. So I don't have anybody to blame. I don't have anybody to blame. I can't blame anybody. There's no more part of the justice system. The visible justice system is what I just laid out. But there is a justice system. There's a social justice system. There's a social justice system that we deal with drugs, alcohol, poverty, race, racism, education, inequality, unemployment. This is what I deal with. This is what I have to deal with in policing. I can't blame anyone. It's the social justice part. People commit crimes. I have to deal with it. So this is where collaboration comes into play. This is why you being here is so powerful. This is why I was so excited about this idea of collaboration and justice and what does it mean to Madison. So if we're going to collaborate, let's talk about what does it mean to collaborate and what puts us in the best position to collaborate. What puts us in the best position to collaborate is this. Collaboration starts with I. What can I do? Collaboration also starts with how can I take personal responsibility for my actions and change my behavior? That's one. Collaboration also, there's an attitude with collaboration if you're going to do it right. You have to put yourself in a vulnerable position if you're going to listen to people. You have to have empathy. You have to have respect. And I don't mean respect from the standpoint of just, I tolerate someone. I'm talking about an active relationship where you believe in people and you believe in humanity. In fact, if I were to say to you that I tolerate is my threshold, and you think about some of your great relationships that you have, you don't tolerate that person. If I were to say to you, if you were to say to me, Noble, how is your wife? Well, I tolerate her. That was not going to go over well at all. Okay? That's not going to. So respect is an active thing where there are no invisible people. And I talk about this quite a bit. No invisible people. So when you go to Woodman's or you go to whichever store, the market, and somebody's bagging your groceries, hello, they're not invisible. When you go to a hotel and someone comes in and they're cleaning your room, hello, they're not invisible. That's respect. That's what you need. That's the attitude that you need for collaboration. Collaboration, we also need, and this is what I saw over and over again when I was in Ferguson, because I was there with citizens and police officers, and we're talking about implicit bias of all things, okay? But when I'm in the room with them, all of them were not seeking to understand, and I'm talking about on both sides. They were seeking to be understood. They're just talking. Not seeking to understand someone else's perspective, they were seeking to be understood. If you're going to collaborate, you've got to seek to understand. And then, finally, I think that's enough in terms of collaboration, in terms of what that entails, and I will continue that theme through here. Let me talk a bit about, because when John mentioned this, he said, well, how does this look from a city standpoint or a county standpoint? What environment do you have to have for justice to flourish? And there's this book out by a guy by the name of Joel Kotkin, and I always refer to it as book. And he has studied the history of cities, great cities. And he says that there are three things that you need in a city or any small place like a county or city. There's three things that you need. A city needs to be sacred. A city needs to be safe. Safe, sacred, and then busy. Let's go with sacred for for an example. What I mean by sacred is that you have this connection. You have this, it could be religious, it could be spiritual, but you have this connection with a sense of place. If I were to say to you, the city of brotherly love, city of big shoulders, if I were to say to you, Motown, I'm flying in last night, coming to Madison, the pilot got on and said, we've got about 1 hour to go till we get to Madtown. I connected with that. It's sacred to me. So you have to have a sense of place. And it's not just from a city standpoint. If you go to a school, kids align themselves with the school. The more powerful that sacred connection is, the better a church. The more alignment they have with that church. It's got to have that. And then it's got to be safe. People are not going to feel like connecting, communicating, engaging if it is not safe. When Madison got the Wheat and Seed grant, people were not going to come out in those neighborhoods until we made sure those neighborhoods were safe. That was the whole idea behind Wheat and Seed. The last thing is busy. And when I say busy, I mean people are engaged in all things, everything from going to shows, working, going to work, busy, safe, sacred, and busy. And if you think of any place, a neighborhood, if a neighborhood is safe, sacred, and busy, justice will flourish. In a city, the same thing. Now, this is so powerful, this issue of sacredness. When I first came to the Madison Police Department, I used to work in the worst neighborhood at that time in the city. It was called Simpson Street. We used to equal the number of homicides that took place in the entire city. Things got so bad that they changed the name. They changed the name. They call it Lake Point. Okay? They changed the name, but this is how sacred this place is. Every year, those people come back to Lake Point, but they have a Simpson Street reunion. The place was sacred to them. Safe, sacred, and busy. So when those things are happening, justice occurs. Now, I'm going to switch gears here and talk a bit about, those things that we need to do to produce justice. Now, when I was growing up, they used to say, justice is blind. You ever hear that? Justice is blind. Justice is not blind. Justice is blindfolded. Lady Justice is blindfolded. She's not blind. And so when our founding fathers, those that really talked about justice and what justice means, Lady Justice is blindfolded because we're all humans. And we need to do specific things to ensure that we are metering out justice with equity, fairness, and all those other things. So we put a blindfold on Lady Justice so that it will help her not to be biased. Okay, so what are some of the blindfolds I think will help us? What are some of those blindfolds? First of all, I think there are 4 blindfolds that I'm going to talk about. One is the tension, because justice is real difficult. Number 2, something I'm going to call practical wisdom. Number 3, I'm going to call policing with a purpose, okay? These are blindfolds. And then the last one is going to be called procedural justice. I'm going to go through these really quick. Justice is difficult because one of the blindfolds in justice is that there's a tension between a lot of issues that we struggle with. There's a tension between fairness and consistency. We always say we want everybody treated the same way until it is your son, daughter, or mother that gets in trouble. Then you want them to be fair. Okay, there's a tension there. There's a tension between the issue of individual rights and community rights. If somebody is playing their stereo all day and then it gets to be late at night, the community wants that person to put that stereo, to shut the stereo down. There's a tension there. Where's justice on that? And then finally, another tension that I think we deal with in the criminal justice system, and I really felt this as a chief of police, as a police officer, is the people that we have the most contact with. The most contact with. We at sometimes start to demonize them. And so there's a tension in trying to maintain treating that human being with dignity and respect just because you have a lot of contact with them. That's a tension. That's what makes justice so difficult. So those are those tensions. Then there is another one that I refer to as practical wisdom. And this is a good one, a blindfold practical wisdom. Let me first explain to you what I mean by practical wisdom. Practical wisdom, the right way to do the right thing. It is how we come to understand the right way to do the right thing in a particular circumstance with a particular person at a particular time. Practical wisdom is the essential human quality that combines the fruits of our individual experiences with empathy and intellect. It is how we become a good friend, a good parent, a good doctor, a good statesman, a good leader, and a good police officer. Practical wisdom. What do I mean by practical wisdom? What are we getting out of here? I'll explain it with another story. When I was a young officer, and those that have been living in Madison for a while, up at the state capitol, right around the state capitol, used to be just teeming with prostitution. Okay, so they sent me up there as a young officer, foot patrol officer. We used to have these little stains. You had to see, a prostitute had to contact the John 3 times before you could arrest them, okay, before you could do that. So there's this one prostitute that she's made one contact, then she's made another contact. And so the guy that I was working with, the other police officer I was working with, we saw her go up to this van. And so, we're young, we're into arrest. We go, oh, wow, we got this one. She made the third contact. We're going to arrest him. We're going to arrest her. Okay. So I walk up to this van. Do my police thing, look in there. And as I look into the van, the woman is sitting on the right in the passenger seat. Man is sitting in the driver's seat. And as I look into the van, I see this man does not have any legs. Okay? No legs at all. He's got one of these vehicles that you operate with your hand. Now, I could have arrested both of them. Practical wisdom for that time, that point, that particular moment, that was not the right thing to do. I exercised discretion. That is what is meant by practical wisdom. I sent her away and sent him away. By show of hands, another story on this one. By show of hands, how many of you remember the Baltimore riot where the mother came out, grabbed the son, and started wailing on him? Okay. By show of hands, you remember that? Okay. In most cities, that could have been easily charged as a child abuse. I work with the Baltimore Police Department. That lady was not charged. Based upon that time, that moment, from a practical wisdom standpoint, dealing with the social context, that was not the right thing to do. This is something that we have got to learn more of. Practical wisdom, one of the blindfolds. Another one, policing with a purpose. As a young police officer, I didn't necessarily always police with a purpose. I'd arrest, I'd do this, policing with a purpose. What I mean by that is that our job is about service, it's about justice, and it's about fundamental fairness. And that must be grounded in everything that we do. And I'll read you the quote from Stephen Covey, because I think he says it best here. It's a great quote, and you may have heard it before. Policing is one of our most noble professions. The actions of any officer in an instant can impact an individual for life. And I'm sure you all can remember that. I mean, anytime you stop by a police officer, you probably remember the date, time, what it was. It could have been 15 years ago. The actions of a police officer in an instant can impact an individual for life and even a community for generations. Given this realization, every police officer must be grounded, must be centered on what is important: service, justice, and fundamental fairness. These are the foundational principles in which every police action must be taken. Policing with a purpose, and that's here. And then finally, One of the other blindfolds is procedural justice. And many of you have probably heard the term that procedural justice. It's one that's talked about a lot. It's issues related to transparency. It's issues related to fairness. It's issues related to focusing on process and people, relationships, making them as equal as outcomes. But the one that I will talk about, which I think is really important here, is we talk about this in procedural justice is voice, giving voice, allowing voice. And when I say that, I mean on every police contact. There's something innate about us that when something happens, you're pulled over by a police officer, you want to explain your side. It's part of our adversarial court system. You're allowed to explain your side, given voice. It could happen at an individual incident. It could happen in a community. A community can feel a certain way, and it's important for us to allow that to be stated, and we listen and we hear it. It's called giving voice. That's the term for it. And voice could be a matter of venting. Voice could be a matter of providing the law enforcement officer or that department with feedback. And voice could be a matter of explaining your side. I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with citizens that they've been upset. And if you just listen and allow for them to speak, that's procedural justice. Allow for, you can see sometimes the tension goes down if you allow for people to speak. That's what justice looks like. That's one of the blindfolds. That's why this is so important. Let me go to my... Let me go to this last one. I've finished those blindfolds. How do you know if justice is working? There's a test. There's a test. And the test usually is how a community, a city, a county treats its most vulnerable population. The young, the old, issues related to race, economics, homelessness. When we treat our most vulnerable population in a fair way, in a humane way, justice can flourish. Got another story for you. You may recall, it was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we mistakenly, as a department, got rid of some homeless people, their personal belongings. A tough thing. The officers were trying to do the right thing, but somehow their personal belongings mistakenly ended up being thrown out. The homeless advocates were on me tough. I mean, they were on me. I mean, the emails was flying by, Chief Wray this, Chief Wray that. Okay, so I met with them. And they said, well, you know, Chief Wray, why don't you come and visit a homeless shelter? Why don't you go and visit the homeless encampment? Okay, so I agreed to do it. Not smart, I agreed to do it in the winter. Okay, I should have waited till the summertime, but I agreed to do it. And just by way of background, you know, I grew up in the inner city. I worked at this liquor store, so homeless, intoxicated people, implicitly, I think I developed a certain attitude, okay? So I say that by way of background, but anyway. So we went to the homeless shelter, and one of the women where her personal belongings was thrown out, she was there, and she came up and spoke to me. And you know, I apologized in a very authentic and real way, but we got to talking. And as we were talking, she let me know that, you know, your personal belongings when you're homeless, it's your family pictures, it's your medication. You're literally taking your home with you, okay? And I didn't have that level of sensitivity. And then she said, you know, someone next to her said, you know, her skill level of playing the violin is at a point where she's a concert violinist. Whoa, okay. So then I went to this homeless encampment. Now, been policing in Madison for close to 30 years. I thought I knew where all of them were. They took me to some places that, if you drive around Madison, they're more than what you may believe. I'm just telling you. Because I learned a lot that day. So I went to the homeless encampment, and I sat down with this guy, and he had this blue tarp, and he had it there, and I sat down on the plastic container right next to him. And so we got to talking, Then it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour. And there's a snowstorm going on. Of course, this is Wisconsin. We got to talking. We got to talking about why he likes Brett Favre over Aaron Rodgers. And we were talking for hours about this. Then there's a third guy that I ran into, making $53,000 a year. $53,000 a year. He's at this homeless encampment. He just said, look, Chief, I just can't do it. I don't want the restrictions of living in an apartment. I don't want to be bothered with that. I just can't, okay? So as I walked away from that experience, the homeless disappeared and human beings emerged right in front of my eyes. The homeless disappeared and human beings emerged right in front of my eyes. That is the importance of connecting. That is where the foundation of respect and justice happens. Now, I wish I would have had the leadership to do this long time ago. Homelessness left and human beings emerged. The humanity of it. Then the last thing I'll mention about justice and how we achieve justice here in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Dane County, is that I think it's really important for us to be able to forgive each other. To be able to say that we're sorry. To be able to let some things go, but reconciliation is there. We must be able to forgive and create the environments to say that we're sorry. And I've got another story for you on this one. This is the last one, though. It's the last one. In 2006, the city of Madison was celebrating its sesquicentennial. Okay? We were 150 years old. I couldn't even say the word when it first came out. Sesquicentennial. Okay, so we're celebrating the sesquicentennial, so I get this brilliant idea that I'm going to commission a badge that was worn back 150 years ago. Now, you got to understand cops' humor. They gave me a hard time with that because the badge was the exact replica worn in 1856. So it was a star. So they would call them gang stars. They would call them gang stars. And it wasn't a mistake because it was an exact replica, but if you look at a star, you'll notice that there are little balls on the end. They didn't have balls on the end back then. So I had police officers, I'm getting stuck. This is dangerous, workers' comp. I heard it all. I heard it all. I mean, it was it. But, I decided that I was going to present this badge to then Mayor Dave Chislevitz and any of the former chiefs that would come. So we had this event over at the Madison Municipal Building. Dave Chislevitz was there, David Cooper showed up, and there were some other dignitaries that showed up. So I grabbed the badge, the plaque, because it was mounted on this plaque, exact replica. And so as I'm looking at it, and I handed, I think it may have been to Dave Chislevitz or David Cooper, I forget which one. I cannot tell you why tears came to my eyes. I couldn't tell you why, but a whole lot of thoughts started to come out in me. And here's the thought that came out in me. And this is what I mean, forgiveness, reconciliation. Here's a thought. In 1856, I would not have been able to wear a badge. I would not have been able to commission a badge. I would not have been able to be a chief of police. In most states, I would have been a slave. Okay? But I walk away from that experience still believing that this is the most noble profession. And I'm honored, and people have died for me to be able to stand up and hand a mayor a badge. Reconciliation, forgiveness. It is so important. People have died for us to be able to do this. Justice. It is America, it is Madison, it is Dane County. So thank you all very much.